everybody. How you doing? Welcome, Rhythm Guitar Rockers. This is Mark Turco from rhythmguitarlessons.net. And today we got a little YouTube live for you. And I have a very special guest today, very good friend of mine. I think we're going on 10 years of knowing each other. So it's been quite a while. His name is Tommaso Zillio, and he has and runs the website Music Theory for Guitar. And on that website, you could find a ton of resources of how music theory can directly apply to your guitar playing. He has lots of free resources there. He has paid courses, a few of them which I've taken. Excellent stuff. So please help me welcome Mr. Tommaso Zillio.
Hello, Internet. So nice to see you. How's it going, guys?
Yes. So after my technical faux pas,
Yep.
are running 10 minutes late, but we are doing it. And thanks to Tommaso reminding me of a setting I needed to enable.
Those streaming software are horrible.
Yeah,
I mean, there's so many things you need to set for everything to connect.
I have it all written down on a list too, and that's the other thing. I have it written down. So anyways, we're going to be talking about guitar pedals and effects. The good, the bad,
the ugly.
About it. So Tommaso and I, actually, the last time we did a live stream, prior to our live stream, we were discussing, I don't know, chorus pedals, I think it was.
Yeah.
Somehow it worked its way back into the live stream. And I was thinking about certain things to talk about with Tommaso. And then I came up with the idea, well, we both like to talk about pedals. So, I mean, you use them in rhythm guitar, you know what I mean? So, and I know you enjoy pedals yourself and effects. So I figured, well, let's see. Why don't we just hang out and talk about pedals?
Yeah. The thing is that we a long time ago, I identified as a non-pedal snob. Like I used everything as long as it worked. And then I realized that no, I'm really picky about what I play through. Okay? But it's never what other people think. Okay, like I don't know, the tube amp or other things. So I have a few tube amps, but at the end of the day, I find playing through digital stuff for many things you actually sound better because you don't have to push the volume.
All right, so let's start with that then.
So yeah, we could start with that because everybody's like, no, I like the sound of a tube amp. And by the way, I love the sound of a tube amp too. But to get the right sound, you need to really push those tubes. And even if you have the super small half a watt, whatever, you still need to push it at volumes that are beyond what you can do in a house. Okay. So.
Correct. Even the low wattage ones, they do have a sweet spot. I mean, tube amplifiers that have great master volume controls on them today, many brands have them. You can really get good sounds at that whisper TV only type volume. They really can. But even those amps, when you turn them up a little bit louder, there is a sweet spot, and it still sounds better. As great as it sounds at a super low volume, they do have this sweet spot, which is not practical for playing at home late at night, apartment playing, stuff like that.
No, indeed. And even if the amp is perfect, then you have to go through the cabinet. And the cabinet is an actual physical cone that you have to move, okay? And the cone will sound good only at a certain volume because it's a rigid thing. So you need to push it to make it sound good. And so at the end of the day, what you hear today, and people will like, you can hear it sounds digital. If I didn't tell you, you wouldn't be able to tell. But today, I'm going through a digital amp, like I always do. Okay, because the thing is that I did this thing once, which convinced me. Is once I was recording a song, and I recorded it in my home studio, so here essentially, okay. And this was like 12 or 15 years ago. And we had the Line 6 pod. Remember, there's the Line 6 pods, which very much maligned piece of equipment because they sound absolutely great if you know what you're doing. But people are like, no, they sound fizzy. No, they sound this and that. But if you stick a microphone in front of an amp, they sound exactly the same. So I recorded a song, and then I actually put it online. I took it out later, but I put it online and saying that this was a vintage Marshall amp I found in a studio. And everybody was like, oh, you can totally hear the tubes pushing there. You can totally hear the vintage stuff. It was a pod, a Line 6 pod. People really have expectations about that, and if you can trick them. Okay, now I don't like tricking people, honestly, but this tells you that good tone is not just only what you hear, but what you expect. Okay, and in the history of guitar playing and rock and roll, there have been plenty of bands using solid state amp or digital amp or strange things that are not tube amps, and just telling you it's a tube amp. Okay, there's this band called King X. Know them?
Good tone.
Yes, but that tone is a solid state amp.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
They kept, when we were live at the work, they kept it covered under a blanket, so nobody could tell what it was, but it was a solid state amp. So let's get this out, okay? Now, I'm not playing a tube amp. I don't know if you are right now, but I'm not.
I'm not. I'm going direct. I'm going direct. I am going through an amplifier simulator, and I have a pedal board with some effects going in, but prior to that. So I'm going through that for this particular setup.
Yeah.
For our live stream here. One thing I wanted to mention to you about the digital modelers and all that stuff for overdrive sound. What people don't forget is, I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm a lot. I perform with amplifiers, and I like the way it sounds. I like the way it feels. I like to feel the air moving. I don't want to hear my sound just coming back through a floor monitor or an in-ear. I don't play super crazy large venues or anything like that. So I still like that old feel of feeling the music and hearing it at the same time. But when it comes to this type of format, I think it depends what you want to do. If you want convenience and you want to play live and use in-ears, it's going to sound good. The technology has gotten us there. And what people don't realize is that if you go back and listen to your favorite albums, the signal chain is not just the guitar into some pedals into the amp. It's just the very beginning, because then it goes into a microphone, and then it goes into a certain type of mixing console, and then there's compression on it, and then you get it in the mix, and then there's a mastering aspect to everything. So the guitar sound that you hear on the album isn't necessarily the same sound that got captured if you were standing in the room when you listen to Van Halen 2.
Yep.
It's going to sound different. So you're hearing the finished product.
Yeah, and there are a lot of steps to get to that finished product.
Exactly. And so what modelers do and all this other stuff is they're giving you the finished product. They're giving you the finished product. So it sounds like the album, not what it sounds like through your amp, through some live sound guys' microphones into his board, the way that he mixed it without mastering. It may not sound just like your favorite guitar player's tone.
Mm-hmm.
So
see, that's the thing. When we're talking about the pod before, and the pod has had a microphone, a cabinet and microphone simulation inside, and I mean, it was a bit of a rough simulation. Okay, it wasn't perfect, but people are like, it sounds pretty fizzy. Well, if you stick an SM57 in front of an amp and listen to the signal, it's typically pretty fizzy. I mean, then you have the onboard EQ on the console, where you make it a little less fizzy. Then you mix it later and do other things, compress, etc. There are lots of steps after that. But the amp in the room and the amp through a microphone sound completely different, and you can optimize for one or the other. And lots of people optimize for how the amp sounds in the room because that's what they hear. And then they wonder why it doesn't record as well, or all those things. The microphone makes a big difference. Indeed, I would say that if you have to spend more money on something, don't spend more money on the amp, spend more money on the microphone. Okay, like very brutally speaking about resources here, because a good microphone and spending maybe a couple of hours thinking exactly where to put the microphone, doing tests, push it in closer and far away on the side, turn it a little off axis, etc. Find the right position of that microphone, and this makes the most difference when you record your guitar. I'm going through a digital amp, but I'm not using the direct out. I have a microphone just in front. Actually, the microphone costs more than the amp.
I believe that.
by a factor of probably 2. Okay, so just saying. Okay, so I could stick anything else in. I mean, I have the Mesa Mark V 25 there. Okay, which is a great small amp that works perfectly live, because I mean, if you push it, you can still drown the drummer, no problem. And when I'm here in studio at the volume of the studio, that and the digital amp sound pretty much the same. Maybe the digital sounds a little bit better. At gig volume, you're better, or the better off. That probably sounds better. The Mark V sounds better, but so
I totally agree. I mean, I don't think there is right or wrong. I think there's just different.
mm-hmm.
And I actually think, depending upon the application that you're going to be the situation you're going to play in, it actually calls for, I mean, for me, I want convenience. If I'm not performing live, I want convenience.
Well, like I say, it depends how much they pay. For a paid gig, I'm lagging whatever they want. I mean, no problem. I mean, it depends how much they pay. But otherwise, convenience is king. I mean,
I'll tell you what. So my live rig is ever evolving.
Mm-hmm.
I have that illness. I chase this tone that's in my head. It's a unicorn. It doesn't exist. And so I just totally revamped my whole thing again. And what I have going on now is 2 overdrive pedals stacked, because I'm going to be playing in a pretty heavy band. I need a lot of overdrive. So I like to stack 2 overdrives together instead of have one distortion pedal on 10. That's just my personal preference, stacking overdrives to get high gain. But I bought a power amp, a tube power amp, and I have a solid state preamp, and it sounds just like if I went into the clean channel of a tube amp and used it. And so this is a recent discovery for me, that I realized that, for me, at least in my opinion, what makes a tube amp sound like a tube amp is the power amp section.
Yes.
It's not the preamp. Even though the signal passes through it, I got the warmth out of that I wanted out of my, because I don't care if I use an amp. I don't care if I use the overdrive built into the amp, or if I use a distortion pedal. I don't care. That I have no personal preference. To my opinion, they equally work just as well, and I get the sounds that I want. I do not think one is superior to the next. But when I decided to do this rig, I bought a tube power amp, and I just happened to have a preamp pedal. Okay, it's solid state, and it boosts the line signal up, and it has just bass, middle, and treble EQ on it. And
Yes.
when I plugged that in, I was amazed that because I thought, well, now I got to buy a tube preamp. And even though I'm going to run it clean because I want to use these overdrive pedals, but let me try this anyways. I don't need it.
Yep.
For me, I don't need it. So, I mean, you're talking about all combinations of different stuff.
Yep. It depends how in depth you want to go here. I mean, we could do 3 hours only on preamps. But the thing is, I know something about electronics. My wife is also an electronic engineer. That helps. Okay, so if you take the good Marshalls, okay, all the good ones, you know which one I mean.
Yeah.
And you look at the schematics of the preamps, you will discover that the distortion, you can get distortion, of course, on the final on the power side, or you can get distortion from the pre side. In the pre, the distortion works because there is a diode clipping the signal. That's not tube distortion, first of all. I mean, if tube distortion is something that actually existed in the way people think that it is, but it doesn't. But anyway, the distortion you get from the Marshall preamp is pretty much the same you will get from most distortion pedal by raising the gain, because the distortion pedal has a diode inside too, or something similar. It's not that difference. What makes a difference is the power stage.
Yeah.
But again, to make that work, you need to push those tubes. And if they're typically if they're big tubes that can hold 50 watt, 100 watt of power, the volume is too much. You have to remember that again, all those amps were designed before we had the PA systems. So the idea was to put them on stage, you point them to the public, and the public hear the amps directly.
Yes.
Then we invented the PA, where you have the sound, we put a microphone in front, and then the public hears the PA system, not the amps.
Yes.
We should have scaled down the amps immediately, but we didn't, because I mean, it's the wall of amplifier is very cynic, and people are like, no, if you have to play loud to make it work. And nobody was even thinking of asking an engineer or something like, can you make an amp that is like half a watt or a watt or something like that? And so nobody did. Now they're making them, and they sound great, to the point that many bands, even classic rock bands, now they have the wall of fake Marshalls and the little 1 watt amplifier in the backstage with the microphone in front, because they can get the good sound at a lower volume, which makes it easier for the sound technician to raise the singer and all this kind of thing, because your amplifier goes back into the singer's microphone. Anybody who played live know that. It's a problem. Okay, so anyway, point is, first of all, the technology today, we have great sounds with practically everything we use. Okay, you guys can use a tube amp, possibly a low wattage tube amp, a solid state amp, a digital amp. You can use a modeler, you can go direct, you can use a microphone. You can do a number of things. They all sound good. If it doesn't sound good, it's typically not the problem, like people think, of the distortion or the lack of tubes, etc., that you need to EQ that sound. The typical problem of many modelers is that they don't have the same amount of bass, and that's on purpose, because I mean, what we like when we play an amp in the room is that you play and you can feel the guitar in your chest. Now, I mean, probably you're not hearing the guitar in your chest through the live stream, but if you were here in the room, you would feel that bass rumbling in you, which is great. It's fantastic. But whenever you record the guitar, okay, you lay a track, okay, and then you record the guitar on top. I can tell you that the first thing that the sound technician or the sound engineer or the mixing engineer does is cut the bass.
Yes.
That's the first thing they do every single time, because there's too much bass. I mean, it sounds good to you, the guitar player, but you are hogging all those frequencies that should be free. Okay, so if you play by yourself, if you play solo guitar, okay, not lead, solo, like meaning you do your own thing with no accompaniment, sure, put all the bass you want. But the moment you play in a band, cut that bass a little bit. You make everybody else's life easier. The sound that sound good in the mix is not the sound that sound good by itself, and people always forget that.
Yes.
And again, we are still talking preliminary. We didn't talk about pedals yet. Okay, we're just let's start with a good bass. Okay.
Yeah, but that's true because I got that education in the recording studio with the band 25 years ago, and I recorded my tracks, and I was sitting at the desk, and I was with the sound engineer. It's when we used to record on desks and tape and everything like that. and it sounded great. He's like, "What do you think?" I'm like, "It sounds great. It sounds great. Could you isolate my guitar track? I want to hear it soloed." And he did. And I was just like, "What happened?" And he looked at me like, "What's the matter? Do you hear something? Was there a mistake? Is not a good take?" And I'm like, "Dude, that doesn't sound good." And he unsoloed it and put it back in. And he's just like, "I don't know." And I'm like, "Wait, do that again." And he did it again. I'm like, "That's what it sounds like in the mix?" He goes, "Yes." And I said, "Wow. Okay. Well, then if this sounds good in a mix, even though it's recorded, maybe when I perform, I should set it up so then that way, that's the way my amp is getting mic'd up. And then that way the sound engineer doesn't have to fiddle faddle with a lot of knobs and potentially change the sound that I hope he's going to capture." And then ever since that moment of performing after with that particular band, soundmen would always come up and say, "You guys are so easy. All I have to do is just put a microphone in front of you and adjust levels. There's no EQing at all to make you guys sound good." Because all of us, all the members in the band did that same thing. And that was a real eye-opening experience for me.
Yes. And the other thing is whenever you play a gig, especially paid gigs, and there is a sound technician, one, pay for his drinks. Okay. Two, ask him for advice for your guitar tone. And the sound technician will tell you. And we tell you always typically the same thing. Hey, take that bass down. Hey, push a little bit the mids. All these kind of things, simple things, they make the difference. But make friends with sound technicians. Ask them their advice. Then do it even if it sounds completely anti-intuitive at first. It makes a big difference. So that's one thing. The other thing is that the sound you have in the room or the sound you have on stage are necessarily completely different, and what you do with your tone is completely different. For instance, right now I have a ton of reverb on. You guys hear that? I mean, you can hear all this reverb. Why? Because if I don't, when I'm in the studio, it's a small room and the microphone is just in front of the amp. If I take away the reverb, it's super dry. Okay, it feels like I'm putting the amp on your ear, because that's exactly what I'm doing, because the microphone is just in front. So I need to put some reverb to make it sound more natural. Then again, I also like a lot of reverb, okay, especially when I play clean. So I push it a little bit more. Okay, and then it depends what you want to do with your sound. When you're playing live, you should not have any reverb at all, unless you really, really want to make a statement or an effect or things like that. Because practically every situation where you play live, there is too much reverb already. Just the room, etc. Most places where you can play have a lot of reverb already, or even bass traps, which means that the bass keeps reverberating around, so it's already too much. Once I played a gig in a church. It was a musical, and it wasn't a religious thing. But everybody likes that church because the acoustic is great, and the people of the church ran the church specifically for shows. So it's a great business model, by the way. Okay, that church had a natural reverb between 8 and 10 seconds. So I went in, no reverb, no delay, no bass, just the driest sound you could imagine, and it sounded perfect in that space. If I went back home, when I went back home and I used the same gig, it sounded horrible in my room. So it really depends on the actual space you're working in.
Yes, and so if they have a dedicated full-time sound man, he knows that room better than you. So he'll know how to make you sound great. If he's competent and he's familiar with the room, he knows how to make you sound great. It's just what he does every week. It's not a big deal. So
Yep.
as long as he's qualified, you know, and they didn't pull some guy off the street and said, here, turn some knobs to make it sound good. The sound guys get a bad rap, but a good sound guy is a valuable person to make you sound good, because you're too busy playing up on stage. You're too big. You don't know what it sounds like out front.
No, oh no, you never know. You never know.
But like you said, the natural reverb of the room, bass traps, everything like that, they know that room so well. They know how to make you sound good. And if they think that you need a little bit of reverb, they'll say, hey, if you want, you could put a little reverb on. They'll tell you.
Oh yeah.
They'll
yeah, they tell you. They'll tell you. Again, make sure. That's the thing. Many sound technician will not tell you anything at first, because lots of guitar players out there are very protective of their sound or fragile or something. So if you tell them to do this or that, they get angry. Or so you need to make it clear to your sound technician, hey, I appreciate feedback. You cannot offend me. Just tell me what I need to do. How will this sound? But I've known some magic people out there. Here in the city, I have a sound technician. I mean, you wouldn't know that because his job right now is working in IT. But he recorded some tracks for Ozzy and Deep Purple and all those people. The stories are great, by the way. But that guy has an incredible ear. I mean, he was our sound technician for a few gigs. He enters the space, a space he'd never seen before. He walks around the room clapping, and hear the reverb of the clapping. Goes back to the sound to the soundboard, and start EQing before we even plug in. Okay, and it sounded great. The guy really knew what he was doing. Okay, so. But the idea of getting to know the room before, anyway. So that's the thing. Once we get all these out of the way, so make sure you get a good bass rig, okay, whether it's digital or tube, etc. And then you think about the room you're in, okay. The effects, the EQ on the amp, all this kind of thing are not there because there is the magic setting that works, period. It's because you have to adapt the whole thing to the room. Okay. And I'm saying this because too often you see people going like on the internet and check what are these guitar players' settings on the amp. The settings tells you nothing about the tone of the player. The settings tell you a lot about what room he was in. I know because I chased specific tones for a while. There are tones I really like, and I learned to reproduce in gigs. So I like the tone of Pink Floyd, David Gilmour. I know that he doesn't have one tone. I like all his tones. Okay, so I spent a lot of time trying to reproduce that, and you can reproduce that in specific situation. Usually, you don't have the football stadium around with a big reverb, but I mean, you can still try to reproduce that. I like Andy Timmons' tone. It's a great tone. For Andy Timmons, I have a folder on my computer where I have all the pictures of his amp doing his gigs, because I was collecting all the settings he had. At a certain point, I got his amp, his guitar, his pedals, and reproduce everything exactly. Guess what? It still doesn't sound like him because I'm not pushing it in a room. If I had a room big enough and then I push it, I can get something similar. Okay, so it's not. It's also, yes, tone is in the finger. That's completely true. But at the same time, tone is also in the physical space you have. So you cannot use if I put 100-watt amp in this room, I cannot get to the volume where the sweet spot is before becoming deaf. Okay. And at this point, the room starts distorting because there's too much sound in the room. The room starts vibrating, and then you don't get a good sound anyway. Yep. So anyway, right, so that's out of the way. Okay.
No, but we did touch upon it. So so I started with overdrive and distortion. That's personal opinion, but you touched about the reverb, and reverb is good, but only in the appropriate place. Meaning, like, the room that you're playing in. You're sitting home, you're playing great. It's fine. You have that just totally syrupy, over the top reverb. It sounds fantastic. But it may not be the right thing all the time. So I like reverb, but I'll never use it when I perform live ever.
Oh no, yeah.
You know what I mean? So, some people don't like reverb at all. That's okay. That's fine. You know what I mean? That's fine. Maybe they prefer just a little bit of delay instead of a reverb sound. It's that ambient sound that they want. You can get it from reverb. You can get it from a long delay with it just repeating and not buried, the effect level being below your guitar, whatever. But also the same thing with delays as well goes true with the reverb. It depends upon the room.
Exactly.
So it really depends upon the room. So, or outside. If you're outside, turn up the delay, turn up the reverb. You know what I mean? Because there is no room. Everything's going to sound very, very dry.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But so I got a thumbs up for reverb if used appropriately. I got a big thumbs up for delay.
Exactly.
Those time-based effects, I think they're great. I think it's bad if you use them in the wrong environment.
Yeah, they should enhance your sound, not hide your sound.
Yes,
that's the thing. So
yes, absolutely, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And see, that's another thing that I could be picky about. Okay, once I used to own like 8 different delays, 7 or 8 different delays, and then I started re-auditioning all of them, selling everything I didn't like, and then I ended up with 2 delays. One of them is the Strymon timeline delay, because with that you can do nearly everything, and I like the sound, and I use that in studio. And the other one is the MXR carbon copy, which has 1 settings for me, but that setting is the setting I use live. So I use that pedal live, period. And I like the carbon copy, the original, because it's super dark, so that you get the delay, but it doesn't cover your playing. You can play fast, you can play lots of notes, or you can play only few notes. It just adds the ambience around. But from that time, a lot of other great delay came out. So this is not an endorsement that those are the best delays, period, and then there's nothing else. There are plenty of good delays. But you have to see how it works with your playing, with the style, and the style of music you play, and all this kind of thing. I mean, if you are in a U2 cover band, your delay needs are much different than if you're in another kind of band, like in a heavy metal band, say. Okay, and then there's also the other thing is, if you put too much delay or reverb, you lose in power. So if you like that powerful distortion metal, okay, or even older rock and all the classic rock, etc., if you put too much reverb, you lose in punchiness in your songs, essentially, because the reverb tend to soften up a little bit. Even the delay tend to soften up. So one of the rules I have is that whenever I play rhythm, I take away all the time-based effect. It's a soft rule. I'm not doing it all the time, but especially live, I take away all the time-based effect whenever I play rhythm. Unless the rhythm really requires it. Like, again, if you want to do the U2 things, you need to have the delays. But if it's just distorted power chords or things like that, take away those time-based effect. It works. It works, especially, again, with the rest of the band piling up. Then, here's a little secret. It's not really a secret, but it's something I figured out because I play a lot of gigs where people ask me to reproduce sounds of specific times. Like they ask me to play the musical from the 60s, but they want more of a 70s sound, or they want to play something more with an 80s sound or a 90s sound, and so on and so forth. And so you go and study what makes the difference between the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s sound and all this kind of thing. And what turns out is that it's the modulation effects. Okay, so if you want a 60s, so let me do it this way. Let's see. So if you want a early 60s-ish effect, you use a phaser, okay? Because the phaser was the first modulation effect we invented, and so you use a lot in the 60s, early 70s. So okay, it has this kind of liquid thing that goes on. So that's great essentially for early psychedelic rock and all this kind of thing. Then if you go later in time, of course I don't have them in order, but yeah, they start to use flanger. Okay, so that's late 70s, maybe early 80s. Okay, you get all the you get the flanger. Okay, imagine the Police. Okay, little bit of flanger makes the effect. Okay, you get later in the 80s. The 80s are chorus. Okay, so now you have. I've lost this. Makes sense. So that makes more the 80s, maybe even late 80s. Okay, so we can go on. Okay, then the 90s come back to the phaser again, but a different kind of phaser or a different kind of flanger. So you will have something like that, or this kind of warbly chorus. This is more early 90s. Okay, so if you want the 70s sound, get a tremolo. Okay, and you get all the spy movie stuff and all this kind of thing, or something slower like, oops. I don't know how much is passing to the microphone, Mark. So you have to tell me if you can hear a difference through the microphone.
I could hear a difference clearly. Yeah. So coming through my end, I'm sure it's beaming out on YouTube. If I could hear it clearly, it does sound really good.
So the idea is that you play the exact same thing, but changing the kind of modulation you use, you can give a specific date to your sound, okay? And so you can try and reproduce those things. And I mean, all those modulations sound like some warbly stuff applied to the guitar sound, but the kind of modulation really gives the specific flavor of the music, okay? So you try, before playing a gig, I'm always asking, what sound do you want? What do I need to bring to the gig, of course, but what sound do you want? What do you want me to do? Okay, what's the show? What's the band? What's the feeling you want to give? And then I select the modulation based on that. Okay, and then of course that's the other thing. You want to start associating specific feelings or specific requests, if you want, with specific effects. So one day we were doing this musical, and at a certain point, they had this sleazy scene in the musical. Okay, and so they asked me, play this and make it sexy. I'm like, what am I gonna do here? And the bass player, who was also a guitar player, came to me and goes to my ear, just use the wah. Okay, and it was exactly the right suggestion, because then you go like, you go. Okay, so you get that, and that was exactly the sound that the show runner had in mind, incidentally. Okay, so you still need to start associating those things and think, okay, how do I get the sexy sound? How do you get the romantic sound? How do I get the scary sound? How do I get and so you can adapt to the show. Now I'm thinking more in terms of playing for a musical, for instance, but the same is true if you play with specific bands. A couple of times I was covering for guitar players in jazz bands, And I'm not mainly a jazz player, but I can hold my own. And what happens there is that I go with a completely different sound. I bring a different pedal board at all. But it depends again on the kind of jazz band. If they're more of a small jazz band or a big band with lots of brass, etc., you need to find a way to adapt to that. So you ask the showrunner, what do you want? They have no idea about pedals, effects, etc. But from the way they talk, you can get down to what they want, and that's a great skill to have. Because if you go in and you sound like they want, even if they cannot tell you what they want specifically, but if you are able to interpret what they're saying, then they call you back. And then they recommend you to other people, and you start getting more gigs and so on and so forth. So good skills to have. This is something I would recommend people to do. Is that you can get your own sound, but if you get into a paid gig, you want to understand what the people who pay you want.
Excellent advice. Excellent advice. So that pretty much covered all of our modulation. First, we started with our distortion, then we got into time-based reverbs and delays, and then thank you so much for demonstrating.
Well, modulation is such a big word once you get into that. So that's the thing. It's because I just show you the three main things. Okay. Yeah. But there is so much more. I mean, you have stuff like, let me see. No, not this. Now, what's happening here? That's a Leslie simulator. Okay. Leslie is essentially, the original Leslie was this cone, okay, this speaker that you mount on something, and then you make the speaker physically rotate, and this gives a warbly sound. What makes the sound of the Leslie is not so much the rotation, is that the rotation can go slower or faster. So a good Leslie simulator will have a button that you click to go slower or faster. So right now, it goes at a specific speed. When I click the button, it's slowing down now. And when I click the button again, it's going faster again. And then slower. And that's how an actual Leslie will work. Okay, so, and this little effect here, it's again great. This was used a lot on the keyboard in the 60s and 70s. And I mean, if you like Pink Floyd, you hear this everywhere. Okay, think another brick in the wall during the solo, the famous solo. Don't listen to the guitar. I mean, listen to the guitar is great, but behind, listen to what the keyboards are doing, and that really makes the backing track. The keyboard is using a Leslie simulator. No, a real Leslie there actually. But you do this with the guitar, it really adds a lot of space to the guitar, and it doesn't conflict with other things. But you can go really modern here. I mean, you can get. That's tape simulator. You can hear the crackle and all this kind of thing. I've actually used this live always to play Pink Floyd. Because the first part is a bit ruined, and then you take it out and you play the clean sound, and now the clean, dry sound is much more powerful because you started with the ruined sound before. That's a great effect to put off live, for instance. So use the modulation to make the sound worse rather than better. Or you can use stuff like that. That's for the scary stuff. Okay.
So I have a quick question for you that I know that you could speak to. The level of effect that you have on compared to your clean signal, compared what should you do depending upon the rhythmic density of what you're playing or the number of instruments that are that you're also performing with, or even just the rhythmic density of? I mean, you could have a keyboard player who could be doing a lot of different stuff too.
Yeah, well, it depends a lot on what the other players are doing. First of all, you need to make sure that you cut through the mix.
That's what I was getting at. Thank you. Please elaborate.
Well, cut the bass, increase a little bit the presence, make sure you play something that is rhythmically different than what other people are playing. So if the keyboard is playing all the quarter notes, don't play the quarter notes too. Play the upbeat. Okay, or play something else that complements the rhythm. Everybody, on a typical band or situation, everybody's playing on the first beat of the bar. Like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. On the 1, you get everybody. You get the drummer with the kick. You get the bass player because they have to hold down the chord. The piano player is always on the first beat. You cannot stop those people playing from the first beat. The singer is there. Everybody is there. So you shouldn't be there. You shouldn't. I mean, in a most situation, if you can avoid playing the first beat of the bar, best. Play the second beat or play the upbeat or play something else. This also makes your life easier because you have more time to change the chord, more time to finger the things you want or to set up something more complex. So it works well for everybody. But the idea would be play something complementary. Okay. As for the effects, it really depends what are the sounds of the other instrument. If there are two instruments using a chorus or a flanger, it's gonna sound bad because the chorus and flanger works by slightly detuning your instrument and putting the straight sound, the dry sound, and the detuned sound together. If too many instruments are detuned at the same time, it starts to sound like you guys are out of tune, period. So if somebody else is using a chorus or a flanger, you shouldn't be using a chorus or a flanger. In this case, put in a phaser, because the phaser does not detune your sound. The phaser is just a kind of an EQ. Imagine you have an EQ and somebody's moving all the EQs up and down. That's how a phaser will work. So that will work better. Or you use a wah or an auto wah or something like that will work perfectly even if other people are using choruses or flangers or other things. So you need to know a little bit your modulation. If everybody's using a lot of reverb, don't. Okay, because there will be too much reverb in the room. So you need to also compensate for the rest of the band, in a sense. Okay. Sometimes you cannot get your best tone because you cannot convince other people to turn down their things or to turn down their effects. But if you compensate, you still sound better than just doing the straight thing. Okay, so it's always kind of I'm not saying being a team player, but it's always kind of thinking of what the overall effect is and trying to be your best in that context and use the effects to help you there. So for instance, another thing is this: if you're playing in a metal band, use as much distortion as you want, no problem. But even there, sometimes when you turn it down and just raise the highs, for instance, you get a better cutting power from distortion. But in practically every other situation, you really don't need that much distortion. And at gig level, at gig volume level, it's going to sound really, really harsh if you use all that distortion. So for instance, right now I have 3 overdrives here. And of course, I took down the volume by mistake. Now, through the microphone, it will sound probably like quite a lot of distortion, but that's a very, very, very mild overdrive. If I take it out, that's the clean sound. If I put it in and I play it quietly, I can still hear the clean sound. The beauty of this is that I can go from cleanish to distort it just by using the dynamic. That's more than enough for more for most realistic purposes live. Okay, again, unless you play in a metal band. Okay, or these different EQ, different overdrive. If I play it quiet, it's these. You can hear that with the low dynamic, it's nearly clean. The higher dynamic, I get more. So you need to study a little bit all these things and see what sound you're after, what kind of gig you're after. But in general, at room level, you typically have more distortion because since you have less volume, you typically compensate by adding a little bit of gain that gives you a little bit of sustain to the sound. But when you go at gig volume level, you need to compensate by taking that distortion down because the volume, the sheer volume of the amp is going to keep you up with the sustain and compression, etc., etc. So a lot of people, when they play live, they use just too much distortion because they made the tone at bedroom level. You should always make the tone at gig volume level if you're doing a gig, which means you don't go to the gig with your acoustics or your Kemper or other things with a patch already made. I mean, get your patches for your bedroom level, no problem. When you go live, get a clean patch and do the sound, period. Okay? Simple as that. Because when you're live at a live volume, everything sounds different and you may not even notice at first. Get a clean patch and do it for gig volume level. There's also, by the way, a reason why I don't use many modelers. I mean, while the XFX, the Kemper, and the Line 6 Helix, all this kind of thing sounds great. I mean, you cannot say anything about that. Personally, I get kind of lost in all the settings. I mean, the temptation is to go in and start tweaking everything. Let me change the rigidity of the tubes, okay, to give it a bit more sag. Do that to this, and let's change the exact distance of the microphone. Live, honestly, I like to have something that sounds good, period, and it's as simple as possible. So like an amp, digital or tube, get an amp, make it sound good, period. The modeler can work, but again, since you have to redo the patch anyway, it's long to do a good patch on a modeler. It takes some time. And you typically don't have that kind of time in an average sound check. I mean, it depends. But
totally agree. I get lost in the menus, and I find that I do more programming than I do playing. So if it's at home use and then also on the fly to make adjustments, it's easier to turn a knob than it is to go into a menu.
Yeah.
But that's me personally. I know plenty of people that don't do what I do, and they do just fine. They do just fine. But I know me personally. I mean, like I said before, when I set up that that new rig, I swapped out one of the overdrive pedals, and I spent 2 hours turning knobs. There's only 3 knobs on each overdrive pedal, but to get the right combination, to have both of those pedals set the right way when they were stacked on top of each other to sound right. I spent, my intention was plop down the new overdrive and practice for this gig I got coming up. And 2 hours later, my time was up. I had to be someplace else, and I spent 2 hours turning 3 knobs on 2 different overdrive pedals, and I got to where I wanted it to be, but I didn't practice. And that's only 3 knobs on a physical pedal. Never mind a menu that can go deep and deep and deep and deep. But here again, I know plenty of people personally that they don't do that. But I know for me, I get lost.
Well, there's already so much depth in those 3 simple controls. And if this pedal doesn't sound the way you like with just those 3 controls, you just don't like that pedal.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's lots. I mean, practically all the guitar tones that we love. Okay, all the classic guitar tone that people love have been made with very simple rigs. Okay, I mean, maybe with a few exceptions. I'm not saying everything. I mean, if you go with David Gilmour, that has the super big chain of pedal with, sure, but you can get a decent approximation with an amp and two pedals, honestly. Okay, I mean, not saying it's studio quality exactly the same, but you can realistically fake something like that with much less, because he did too. He uses more effect to make it better, but you get into diminishing returns. Every effect you add doesn't add less and less and less to the sound. We have today a lot of complexity in those modelers, which, if you can manage, is great, and if you already know all these gear, great. But otherwise, you need to get to know it, and it's a lot of gear to know. I mean, it's sometimes historically speaking, we got the great sound in a band because they had only that amp and they had to make it work. And so it was original because they're like, okay, we have this amp, it sounds good, but we need to tweak it until it sounds great. Okay, I'm pretty sure we will never have, I don't know, U2 or Queen or all these other kind of guitar sounds if they had a modeler, because part of their sound is just adapting to what they had. Okay.
Yes, exactly. They were using what was available to them, either what was on the market at the time or what they actually physically owned, because they had money limitations and they could only afford to buy this or that pedal, and they bought this pedal and they made it work.
Exactly.
Yes, totally agree.
So I mean, today we have it good. We can have nearly anything. Okay. To the point that there are even people selling overdrives for $1,000 on YouTube, telling you that it's the best thing ever. It never is. Let me put it this way. So that's my clean sound right now. That's one of the overdrive I played before. Which is a fairly good sound, if I say so myself, okay? Mark, how much will you pay for this sound?
How much would I pay for that sound?
I mean, to go from these to these, how much would you pay for this pedal?
Me personally, or how much would one could possibly pay?
Either one.
Either one? Well, the clean sound, I wouldn't pay much for.
Yeah.
Because I believe that a lot of even just basic inexpensive amps have pretty decent clean sounds.
Yeah.
The overdrive sound, though, because of the touch sensitivity, the harder you dug in, the more it had more overdrive, and then you lightened your touch with your right hand and it cleaned up. That sensitivity, I would say that's probably worth around $1,500 US dollars to get a good amp that responds in that manner.
Yep.
I would say probably you would be spending, I would spend around, I would start looking at amps around the $1,500 price point that could do that. A small amp. I'm talking a small amp, a combo amp, just a little combo amp.
Okay, so right now the entirety of I'm gonna tell you guys exactly what I'm playing through. Okay, that's a Fender Professional, American Professional 2. No custom modification, so stock. In which I put dial in the pickups up and down the right way. The amp is a Boss Katana 50 on the clean setting. that. Okay, period. The microphone is a ribbon microphone. That makes a lot of the sound. I have an reverb pedal. It's an Immerse Mark II by Nunaber. That's probably the most costly thing on the rig, because I'm really picky about reverbs. The Overdrive is the most inexpensive piece, because I spent, believe it or not, $20 on that pedal. 20. And
Wow.
it's yeah, I know.
Really?
Yes. The price of that pedal went a bit up, so probably you're gonna spend 50 on that. It's a K-Line Pure Sky. It's CALINE, Pure Sky. It's a Chinese Overdrive. Okay. It feels cheap as hell when you hold it. I'm gonna buy another couple just in case this craps out at a certain point. I mean, it gets from clean to fairly distorted. Yeah. And it's not harsh. It's pretty warm. Okay.
Yeah.
If you want a little bit more edge, then I have this other Overdrive, where you still can get. Okay, let's get a bit more edges, a bit more presence. This probably will work better if you have more. You need to cut through the mix. That Overdrive, it's a Boss Blues driver. Okay, so nothing boutique. Okay. I mean, the most boutique thing I have here is an OCD Overdrive. I'm using those for the big distortion stuff. So that's what I have on the pedal board. So,
well, that definitely speaks to, you have to let your ears tell you what you like, not the brand, not the price tag. Like before we went live, I pointed out the skinny little blue pedal on my board. It was a $30 chorus pedal. And I'm very particular about my chorus pedals. I have a couple of vintage ones, Black Label, Boss. I have an old Ibanez one. I also have a more expensive, newer model, new brand one. You know, it's a few $100s for that chorus pedal, and I really do like that chorus pedal. So I'm very particular about my chorus pedals. But that's a $30 pedal I bought on Amazon, and I use it for my acoustic gigs. I've used it with an electric guitar, and it just sounds good. I went through several $30 pedals to find one that sounds, but they exist. They're there. They exist.
Yeah. And the problem with $30 pedals is that they're usually not as reliable and as the more expensive pedals, because you at a certain point you also pay for reliability, robustness. Okay, buy two. Just spending less than buying the super expensive one. But there are, I mean, you know it. There are overdrives that go easily for $400. If you go and search for the vintage for specific, you can spend $1,500 on an overdrive. There are a lot of very inexpensive, fantastic overdrive pedal, but like you say, you need to start listening to your ears and forget about the price tag, how the pedal feels in your hand. Because lots of those pedals are like cheap plastic enclosure. They feel like toys when you hold them up. So what I do when I'm in this situation, I typically hook up all the pedals I need, and I have somebody else switching them for me, and I look the other way. Okay, because I know I'm gonna be influenced by that. And if you think you're not influenced by that, you're lying to yourself. Okay, so I have somebody else switching the pedal. give them random letters or numbers. So this pedal number 1, this pedal number 2, and typically after a while, like I like pedal 3 and pedal 7. I don't like the other ones. Okay, pedal 3 is like $30. Buy it. It's like, bam. Okay, so that's the way to go. That's the way to go, because otherwise,
there's some YouTubers that do the blind audio test type, like shootouts.
Yeah,
You know what I mean, between a vintage one and a brand new $30 pedal, and you know it's pretty amazing how much your eyes affect what your ears hear.
yeah, your expectation and your wallet.
Yes.
The other thing though is YouTube is great if you want to have an idea of the kind of sound those pedals have, and if you want to see if there's enough difference in the end product between the vintage or the newer one or something like that. But the other thing is that if you're playing those pedals, the way they feel, it's super important too, because sometimes a pedal has a great sound, but it doesn't feel good when you play it. Because the distortion coming in too soon or too late, or that it doesn't have the right curve coming in, or all this kind of thing, or you discover that you like the high frequencies and the pedal really doesn't, and all these kind of things. So you need to play them. That's the thing. You need to play them, otherwise it's not. But yeah, the Ibanez TS10 it's 95 US. It's a TS10. It's not the first tube screamer.
No, and not at all. It was actually shamed when it came out.
Yeah,
I remember when it came out, people were like, "Oh no, it's not like the." Now look at it. They're up to 950 now.
Yeah, I mean I remember seeing the original tube screamer. An original tube screamer from the 70s on one of the local shops here, and I played through that. And I mean, it sounded pretty good, actually. I'm not saying no. But they wanted something like $800 for that. And this was 7 or 8 years ago. I don't want to know what I'm asking now for that.
It's crazy.
I mean, it's just too much. Just too much. I mean, if you are a purist and you want that, etc., but there's plenty of tube screamer clones around there in the market, and you can find something that sounds better than that for a lower price. So
absolutely.
I mean, then we get into a lot of problems like the ethics of things. It's okay to own a clone in some cases, yes. In some cases, yeah, maybe not. When some people rip off somebody else for the exact same design, especially if it's a smaller builder, maybe not. But at the same time, yeah, like you say, we have $30 pedals, okay, and they sound great. Okay. Oh yeah, George here. There's another comment that says the effect that come with the katana are just fine with me. Actually, pretty good. They're actually pretty good. Especially some simulation like the Blues Driver in the katana is pretty good. I still like to have the physical thing. It's a bit of a difference, and I still like the idea of having the knobs to move and to be able to switch the kind of overdrive physically, because if I go out and have and play a gig, it's faster for me to change a pedal on the pedal board than changing the patches in the amp.
Yeah, I agree. It all comes back to your application. It all comes back to your application. One thing I do want to speak to is what you were talking about that you mentioned. How does it feel under your fingers? So I bought this one pedal. It was just a compulsory buy, and I got it, and it was a $200 pedal, and I just immediately thought it was great. It was this great pedal, and then I saw a good deal on one other pedal I kind of wanted to have just sort of in my arsenal. It's just sort of like a classic Marshall Crunch, and I said, okay, I really like this high gain pedal because this is going to fit exactly what I want. It has the right kind of mid-range on the rhythm and the lead. I don't need an additional EQ between rhythm and lead. I'm like, this is wonderful. This is great. This is great. This is my holy grail high gain pedal. It does exactly what I want. When I turn the mid-range up, it's the right frequency that I want to be boosted. Okay. So I got the other pedal at a bargain price. So it was a $200 pedal, but I bought it used. And I really loved it. And I just said, gee, I wonder what it would sound like if I plugged it into my other pedal that I bought used for $50 and stacked those two together? Well, with a lot of knob turning on that session I was talking about, I was able to recreate the sound of that one pedal that I absolutely loved exactly to the way it sounds, except the two stacked pedals felt better under my fingertips.
Right.
And so I was able to recreate a sound that I definitely loved the way it sounded, but I liked the way that the two stack pedals felt.
Yep.
And that's another thing too. So, I mean, you know, we need to listen with our ears and not our price tags, but you also need to pay attention to this. How does it feel under your fingers? Because different pedals feel like I'm fighting with them, and other pedals feel like they're complementing my playing.
Exactly. And that's why it's completely useless to copy somebody else.
Yes.
Rig, even if you love their sound, because they may have completely different ways of playing and different habits on how hard they pick, how they finger the strings and all this kind of thing, and completely different preferences too. Some people really like to have the guitar fighting against them because they want to fight against the guitar. Think Stevie Ray Vaughan, okay?
Yep.
Other people don't. So it really depends. It's not just the sound. And it's also how it feels. I mean, the sound is important because that's what people listen to. But if it feels wrong, you're not going to sound good anyway.
No, you're not going to play. You're not going to play as well as you possibly can.
Exactly. So
I think that is really, in summary, kind of what I was hoping to achieve with this live session with you, is that it depends. It depends. Are effects good? It depends. Are they bad? It depends. Which one should I buy? It depends. There's all of these variables, you know, how much should I use? How much shouldn't I use? What is the right way to do it? It depends. It really is situational. So yes.
For instance, there is one kind of pedal that if you don't play them, you don't know anything about them, which is compression. Compression needs to be felt.
Yes.
I went through so many compression pedals. It's not 3 digits yet, but nearly at this point. Okay. Because it's a matter of feeling. You need to find the compression, the sound that feels exactly the way you want. Otherwise, it's just. And there are so many different compression kinds of compression, etc., and the way to dial the thing in the pedal and so on and so forth. You need to play them, and then you need to play them in all situations, because again, one way will be the compression pedal will feel one way in the bedroom and one way on stage. So I mean, every pedal will have a feeling, but the compression are mostly feeling. That's kind of the point.
Yes, it's very different from brand to brand. Even in the same brands, they have multiple compression pedals. Same brand will have 2, 3, 4 different compressors just because of that reason.
Yeah, and they will feel completely different.
Yes, they will. But they all kind of do the same job.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, at the end of the day, I found that most of the time I don't use compression. I mean, I have a compressor pedal here, but it's nearly always off. It's on only if I really need the clean sound and lots more sustain. Then I just that helps a little bit with the sustain, but tiny effect. So
yes.
But again, depends. Some people really love their compression and having the sound super squash, and that's good too. I mean, it sounds good if you know what you're doing, but it needs to be felt. That's the thing. So I think at the end of the day, our recommendation is try a lot of things. Think of where you're using it, but definitely try a lot of things.
Yeah, I would definitely suggest, if you like the sound of pedals, is to try them. See what works for you with your playing style. Use your ears. Pay attention to your surroundings. And have fun. Because pedals are fun.
That's the point.
At least to me, I love pedals. Pedals are fun.
Yeah.
Well, Tommaso, I want to thank you so much for coming here and being live and helping me out with my technical problem that started us 9 minutes late. But before we go, I definitely wanted to mention to you, I'm sorry, to everyone who's watching this, you do have something that's free to give away.
Yep. Yep. I have this thing. What it is? No, there. Okay. Okay. One thing that makes your guitar playing much easier is if you know where are the notes on the fretboard. And people always think like it's so hard to learning all the notes of the fretboard, and then when I learn them, I forget them. And then they start using things like the octave pattern, or like I'm gonna find the note here, then use the octave to find the note up here. Well, by the time you do all these, we are on the next song. Okay, so the only way to learn the notes and make them useful is to have instant recall of the notes. It looks hard to do. It's not hard to do if you know what you're doing. So in this ebook, what it is, this ebook, which is completely free, you just get it. And there are videos, okay, in this ebook too. I'm giving you specific exercise details, okay. I'm showing you, I'm playing them in video, and I'm telling you exactly what I'm doing. There is a series of exercises from super easy to super hard, and you do them for 5 minutes a day, 5 minutes a day, no more. Every day, 5 minutes a day, and in a few weeks, you just know all the notes on your fretboard, period. You don't need to think about it anymore. It's just perfectly memorized, instant recall, effortless instant recall. It's just like somebody wrote the name of the notes on your fretboard, okay? It seems like magic. It's not. And then again, guys, it's free and 5 minutes a day. The risk is minimal. So, I mean, go and get it at this link below, okay? It's completely free. Get it. Try it. It will change your musical life.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I advise everybody to do that. Even if you think you know the notes on the fretboard, I mean, it's free. So you might as well just take a look at it, because it might help you in recalling those troublesome notes. Everybody has a troublesome note here or there on the fretboard. Very much so. Even if you think you know it, why not? It's free. One thing I do want to tell you guys about is that I do have a free resource as well, and it's the beginner's guide to adding lead guitar elements to your rhythm playing. So if you've ever listened to somebody play guitar and you hear these notes that occur, single notes that occur like in between a chord change, and you wonder, how do I do that? How does that happen? What notes are they playing? How do they know which notes to play? This will definitely give you an introduction. There's audio examples, there's tab. I tell you exactly which notes to play that are going to sound good. So you don't have to take there's no guesswork in it. It's actually, that's why it's called the beginner's guide. And it can really, really step up your game as far as your rhythm playing goes. And it's almost like the ultimate party trick. If you just strum a chord and play a few single notes, and then strum another chord and then play a few other single notes, I mean, people are absolutely amazed. I mean, you could be working on, playing a really fast scale, and they go, okay, whatever, but that didn't sound like music to them. So if it's something you wanted to do, you want a good party trick, it's actually a really good place to get started. So, well, Tommaso, I want to thank you one more time. I totally appreciate all your knowledge. I know we are kindred spirits in this. You know what I mean? It's just, I feel like I didn't have much to say, because you had everything to say, because we agree on everything.
Yeah.
We agree on everything. It's just like, yeah, go. But
there is a reason why we agree on everything. It's because we are working musicians and we work similar circles. Okay. I mean, if you tour the world with big bands and play on stage, things could be slightly different, if nothing else because your sound technicians are of a different level and you pay them way more. Okay. But for the circle we frequent, which is something attainable by also most of our audience, like local paid gigs, studio and live.
Situational gigging.
Yes, exactly. Situational gigging. That's how it works.
Yes.
Okay, I mean, even then, if you later tour the world, you still learn a lot from the situational gigging first. Nobody ever was tour the world before doing some situational gigging.
Right.
So it's good to learn. So, and again, we've both been there. That's the point.
Yes.
Okay, so we agree because we've been there. I found that when people wildly disagree with some of this stuff, I mean, there are many different opinions. But when people are like, "No, I don't know, I'm always using only my Axe effects because blah blah blah," then you go and see them live, and you're like, "Meh," because there are some problems and so on and so forth. And then again, I still like the Axe effects, and I know people who use it live with really good effect, but they always redo their patches on the spot.
Yep.
They become really fast at doing those patches.
If they want to sound good.
Yes, exactly. So
if
that's
they
the
want
thing.
to sound good. And not be set it and forget it. Yeah, I agree. Well, anyways, I want to thank everybody who's here or anybody watching this restream. Tommaso, thank you one more time. And I'll see you next time on the next restream.
Thank you.
You guys have a great day.
Thank you, guys.